Guess who's back in the house? I hope that you guys are having a wonderful day. I just attended JQ International's 4th annual Trans Brunch at the West Hollywood Library. There was a dynamic panel and I learned a lot, and I can't wait to share this video with you. Stay tuned.
Welcome you on behalf of the City of West Hollywood and my colleagues, other City Council members, Mayor John D'Amico, Mayor Pro Tem Lindsay Horvath, Council members Don Howman and John Duran. This is very important to us, and I want to say that I really appreciate that JQ International has done this for the past 4 years and has really taken a leadership role in producing this event. And I think it's important, and especially in observance of the Transgender Day of Remembrance. And for us, it's also, this month is also the National Transgender Awareness Month. So, you know, we feel it's important to have a panel discussion and make people aware of the issues among the transgender community. And so we thank you all for being here. I want to introduce Asher Gellis, who is the Executive Director of JQ International, and thank him for all of his service. And I also just want to give a quick shout out to Jenny from our staff to thank her for helping out here this morning. So thank you, everyone.
Welcome, everyone. I want to also thank our panelists and our moderator, and a special thank you to Anna, who's worked very hard for many years to make this one of our more important panels, more important programs that we offer to the community, and she puts her heart and soul into it, so I want to thank her for that. I have the great privilege of introducing our moderator, someone who I've known for more than a decade. You know, JQ started its trans advocacy work back in like 2008, 2009, and we created a committee that helped us launch educational advocacy programming both for our own community within JQ, but also in the broader Jewish community. And in the very first years of doing that work, Nate was kind enough to open up his home and host one of our transgender Shabbat dinners there. Over the years, he stepped up as a leader in our community, and it was even on one of our panels about a year and a half ago. And we're just very lucky to have Nate as part of our community, and also as a growing, shining leader, putting himself out there and representing the community and helping us advocate for greater inclusion. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Nate Looney. Take a look within our beautiful programs. There's a detailed bio of him you'll find, and take a chance to read it. It's a very impressive bio. And now, without further ado, Nate Looney.
Good morning. It's still morning for about another 12 minutes. It's a little bit of the military in me coming out. So first I'd like to thank JQ for giving me the opportunity to moderate this panel, and I look forward to asking you all some questions. A little bit about me. I am a trans man, a veteran, urban farmer, entrepreneur, and a member of the Jewish community. And for me, I've had multiple coming outs in my life. I found that when I transitioned to being a man, how I was viewed in the Jewish community shifted, because that coincided with me becoming more religious. So it's very interesting that in agriculture we don't think of people being queer in farming. And so when I became a farmer, I pretty much went back into the closet, because my identity became being a veteran farmer to industries that aren't very LGBT friendly. And so now I'm at a stage in my life where I recognize my privilege as someone that's able to move through the world and move in a way that some of my other trans and gender non-conforming folks aren't able to. So I look at it as I have an obligation to speak up and speak out and lean into being visible, even though it's not always the most comfortable thing for me. And especially it's important for me to be involved with JQ International as a member of the Jewish community here in Los Angeles, not just as a trans Jew, but as a trans Jew of color. and speaking visibility into the fact that we have a very dynamic community, and there's more sides to it than often we recognize. I hope for you all here that by listening to the speakers today, you get a better grasp of what the trans and gender non-conforming experience is like. There'll be opportunities to ask questions. So as they're speaking, think about the questions that you want to ask. Be mindful that our panelists have said they're open to all questions, but be kind with your question. And I also want to speak into the space the fact that we've lost a significant amount of trans people this year to violence and suicide. And so as we are celebrating our trans identity, recognize that there are some of us, or there's some that are no longer with us and only with us in spirit. So I want to speak that into this space. So with that, I want to jump into some questions. So Shaan, I'll start with you. You're closest to me. So would you please share a bit about how your journey of coming out and transitioning interplayed with your Indian family, culture, and community? Where did challenges arise? Did any part of the process positively surprise you?
We're just diving right in, huh? Okay, hi everyone, good morning, almost afternoon. My name is Shaan. I'm an actor with a background in film production, he, him, or they, them pronouns. And yes, my family is from India. I grew up in North Carolina. I think the biggest thing that surprised me was actually how much support I received, because it was the biggest thing I worried about. I worried about, the first thing that I wanted to do is make sure spiritually, because grew up with a spiritual foundation, and I wanted to make sure that I wasn't doing anything spiritually wrong. So I had to kind of reconcile that for myself, and that was for me. It actually brought me closer to my spiritual background or my spiritual faith to transition. Once I reconciled that is when I actually started taking the steps. But my family, they say the opposite of love is fear, and therefore the opposite of fear is love. My mom told me years ago, before anything, I would love you no matter what. This is before I said anything about anything. And she knew I was different from my siblings, and I think she knew it was important for her to express that to me. When I told her that I wanted to transition, it was really challenging for her. She was scared, but I think she remembered that above everything else. She remembered that she loves me, and that got her through the difficult times, like the feeling of fear. And my dad was also extremely supportive, and he was there for her through that process. So they leaned on each other a lot. Our extended community, especially like we go to service on Sunday mornings, and a lot of South Asian folks were really just kind of took their cues from my parents. And I think that was the most important thing, is I had my family's support, and I can see that it would have been a really different experience with the community had my family not been supportive. So that was the biggest thing I was surprised by and also moved by, and the biggest thing that gave me strength and courage. Yeah.
Thank you. So I realized I skipped a very important question. So hold that note for a second. So this is to all of the panelists. Let's first take a step back, and everyone state your name, pronouns, and what inspired you to be on the panel today. So since you just went, we're going to start on the opposite side and work our way back.
All right, my name is Joshua, and pronouns are he, him, his. And what inspired me to be on the panel is the hope that people will realize, because I thought that you could pray it away. I was religious and trans, and then when I became more Orthodox, I realized that you couldn't. This was 20 years ago. In the 90s, you could not be Orthodox and trans. So I thought that I could pray it away, which is what all the rabbis were saying you could do, and didn't work. So my hope is that people will realize that being trans or queer is not something that you can cure Maybe you can compartmentalize it for a long time, maybe you dissociate, but eventually it's going to come out. Also, because I'm Orthodox and I'm trans, I want to open up the space for other people in the Orthodox community to feel that there's a space for them as well.
Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Fatima Shabazz. I'm the CEO and president of Fatima Speaks LLC. What inspired me to be on the panel today is that as an African American trans woman, even among a marginalized group of individuals, we are highly marginalized. And I believe that it's incumbent upon us who have a voice to use that voice to let people get a better understanding as to who we are, why we are here, and how we can coexist.
Hi, I'm Shaina. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. And yeah, I wanted to be here just to honor all of the trans people who, you know, however their experience has been, you know, like Fatima just said, I have a voice that I'm able to use, so I want to share my experience and, you know, love of queerness with other people.
My name is Emily Fine, she, her, hers. I just wanted to be here to educate, because I feel like we need to start the discussion with people who are afraid of us, or in some sort of, they're just afraid to talk to us, afraid to confront us, afraid to dig a little deeper and find out about us. I just wanted to be able to maybe offer something.
Same.
Word. So this next question is for Fatima. Fatima, it's important today for JQ to have a Black trans woman represented on our panel. As unfortunately the community is so often ignored and misrepresented in mainstream media. Would you share a bit about that experience with this audience? And please speak more broadly to the necessity for proper representation and what that means to the community you belong to.
Wow, that's a mouthful. As an African American trans woman, I exist in a world every day that could end in my demise. Right? As in case anyone doesn't know, but I'm sure most people know that there's been somewhere close to 28, 29 trans women of color attacked or murdered this year. 22 of those women were women of color like myself who were murdered. And I speak to that on a constant basis. I believe that there are things that need to be done to eliminate that. As an African American trans woman, I exist in a particular duality that is completely unusual and unique for our position, because even among trans people in our community, we are often ostracized as well. So we are restricted from having a voice in many venues. So to have an opportunity to have a voice in this venue is an amazing thing. We have to have representation in every avenue that we walk down. There should be representation across the board of city councils on, you know, and presidential cabinets and governors' cabinets and mayoral cabinets. There has to be representation, because there is a severe lack of understanding when it comes to the transgender community generally and the transgender community specifically. People come into dealing with us with a preconceived notion of who we are. And more often than not, what happens is you get that enough. It's like my mom used to say when I was a kid, if you tell a person that they're stupid long enough, they start to believe that they're stupid. So if you tell Black trans women long enough that they don't matter, they start to believe that they don't matter. And they present to you the face, right, that you expect them to present, because we already know what your preconceived notions are. You know, it's an amazing situation to be in. And I remember a very intelligent individual who once said that the hardest job in America is being a Black man, and the most dangerous job in America is being a Black man. So imagine being me for a day. You know, so with that in mind, I make it a point, that's what Fatima Speaks LLC does, I make it a point to use my voice everywhere that I can, right? And to make it a point to connect with other individuals, be they gay, straight, trans, however they want to identify, be that, you know, self-imposed under our current ideologies, or whether they self-identify. I make it a point to bring understanding to who we are, and why we should be respected, and how that, you know, transcends into the larger aspect of who we are as people. Because everything that we do is social justice. You know, my issues are not different than the straight individual's issues. I have to pay my bills like everyone else. You know what I'm saying? I have to get up in the morning and go take care of my business like everyone else. My car insurance person doesn't care whether or not I'm blue, black, green, gray, straight, or what. He knows that I owe a bill, and I have to pay that bill. But in the larger scope, not having a voice and not having representation in the proper forum so that we can provide understanding for the people that need that understanding is completely disrespectful to us as a community. So that's why I'm here, and that's why I move in these circles. That's why I'm a policy advocate. That's why I write policy. That's why I fight, for stronger enforcement of policies or the recreation of bad policy, because we need to have a voice. And I'm happy to be that voice.
Thank you. And I'd like to point out that Fatima jumped on last minute for us. Unfortunately, Blossom wasn't able to make it, and last minute Fatima was like, "Yep, I'm on board." So thank you for pitching like this. So my next question is for Emily. Emily, we're so grateful for your service to our country of over 3 decades, working in the federal government. Certainly over this time and since, you saw some of the greatest heights of progress for queer rights. Unfortunately, most recently, some of that's been rescinded. Can you share your perspective on how we can be the most civically responsible citizens when it comes to fighting for transgender and genderqueer rights?
Yes, I know all the answers. For me personally, I think everybody in this room is an ally. Everybody wants to be here, and everybody wants to learn something, and we appreciate that. We really appreciate that. So hopefully, some of the things we say today, you can take with you and know that we're all friendly people. We're not a threat to anyone. But I think the main thing is like getting us involved in your group, and a lot of times it's hard to just approach trans people. Trans people are kind of skittish. We're all scared to go somewhere. We're all scared to go outside sometimes. We're scared to go to the grocery store. We're afraid to go out at night. We're afraid to go out alone. And I think that's one of the things that people don't understand. Like, for example, last night I had a guy follow me out from work, and he followed me to my car. Of course, I jumped in my car and locked the doors as quick as I could. And he beat on the window, and I cracked the window. And he said, I just want to let you know you're an awesome singer, and you're the most beautiful man I ever saw. And everything he said before that, I didn't hear. So just know that we're afraid. We take things like that to heart, because we all try very hard to, be ourselves and be real. So I'm just talking in circles now. So.
All good. It makes sense to me. Definitely reverberates for me. Physical safety is a serious thing, and I think sometimes people take that for granted.
I feel like most people do take it for granted, and we can take that for granted.
Absolutely.
We can.
Absolutely. Shaina, this question is for you. Your filmmaking, photography, and art is deeply informed by subject matter of authentic queer representation. Can you share what that means to you, and share a bit more about how your Fluidity project helps you to share your authentic queer experience with the world?
So, to me, authentic queer representation, it's so unique to the individual. Like, there is no single definition. It's diversity in all of its forms that it comes in. And how I try to embody authentic queer representation in the art that I make is by having conversations with the people who I'm photographing or working with, and asking them, like, how do you want to feel in these photos? How do you want to be represented? What stories do you want to tell that you feel held back from when you work with other photographers, or when you're just in spaces where you don't feel comfortable? So it's really just about getting to know the subjects who I'm working with, and making sure that they're comfortable with the ways that I am portraying them, and that I'm portraying them how they see themselves. And then to speak on my Fluidity project, for about a year I've been working on a photo series called Fluidity, and logistically I'll have a subject who's a part of the queer community choose a color and an object, And it can be anything, but it's essentially supposed to be questioning the inanimate objects that society has gendered and the colors that society has gendered. And because it just like, it's so absurd to me. I mean, as a queer, trans, non-binary person, like, straight and cis people are telling me all the time, like, why do you have to make everything about gender? Like, that's what my family says to me all the time. Like, just, it's not about gender. Why do you have to make it about gender? And I'm like, no, like, society has made everything about gender. Like, you're telling me a color is for a man or a color is for a woman? Like, that is absurd. So, you know, the project that I'm making with this photo series is, I mean, it's like making fun of society. Like, this is ridiculous. But it's also just allowing the subjects to kind of, you know, dive into themselves. And I ask them, maybe there's something as a child that you were told was for the opposite gender, and like, you can reclaim that. And I just make beautiful, it's, you know, the photo shoots themselves are like lighthearted and fun, and I get to meet amazing people. And I'm pouring paint on them, and we're pouring paint on objects, and I'm photographing it, and it's just a lot of fun. So yeah, that's the other thing, and how this series was born was, you know, sometime last year when, you know, some awful headline came out about trans people. I had a friend just text me and be like, what do we do? And I was like, I don't know, I wanted to do a photo series, like, why don't we just try, like, let's just get together and try to make something, and, you know, and that's resulted in, like, I don't know, maybe got to meet like 10 to 15 people already, and it's still going on, and it's been beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. Joshua, you've been an incredible lay leader in the JQ community, helping to relaunch and run JQ's LGBTQ+ Orthodox community group. With that said, we understand you've had your own difficult time coming out, transitioning, and finding safe and nurturing Orthodox Jewish community here in LA. Can you take us a bit through your journey, familial and communal responses, and how you were able to overcome your own challenges to be able to build the community you long sought for yourself and for others?
All in 1 minute.
Yeah, on one foot.
So when I was a little kid, grew up in LA, we used to go to Fairfax on Christmas Day, because that's what all the Jews in the Valley did. And I used to see all of the little Orthodox boys with their side curls, the payas, and their tzitzis, and I wanted to be them. I knew that I had to be them. And I couldn't. So I went up through school. I was very tomboyish. In high school, I thought I might be a gay man trapped in a woman's body, but in the late 80s, early 90s, we didn't know what to do with that. So I went to college, came out as queer. I saw Butch Dykes for the first time. I was like, oh, maybe that's me. And then I saw the word transgender, and like choir singing, it was like, oh my God, that's me. So I came out as trans, and I didn't do any medical intervention because I also wanted to have children. And I didn't know if testosterone would affect my ability to reproduce. I came home after college. We were living in an Orthodox community, and because I also was trying to be Orthodox, I realized that I couldn't. Said that already. So I detransitioned is the word we go. I tried to be a girl, and I thought it worked. I got married. I had 4 children. 12 years after my first child was born, I broke for a lot of different reasons. When I was trying to name everything that everything was, I realized, oh, that trans stuff is still there. I came out to my then husband, and then I came out to the community. I got a divorce, and in the Orthodox community in the Valley, I became a pariah. I was not welcome in any of the shuls, the synagogues. A lot of people that were supposedly really close to me, called me family, would not talk to me. They would look at me, walk away in the supermarkets. But thank God, my brother, who was a rabbi on the East Coast, was wonderful. My mother, though she does not call me by my preferred name and pronouns, she's old and doesn't It's too much for her. But she still loves me, takes care of me, wouldn't let anyone go anywhere near me when I had my top surgery. And I had some really close friends, and I had my 4 children, and I at least felt that I had a home. My first child is actually here. I started connecting to Orthodox LGBTQ organizations. There's one on the East Coast, and I started to connect to some people here. A friend of mine showed me B'nai David, which is a modern Orthodox synagogue here, and I realized that it is possible in this day and age to now be trans or queer and Orthodox. And then when I connected with Arya and a couple other people in the city, we started making the space again. And like, it's a small group, but it's a great group, and we feel hope that it's possible to be queer or trans in the Orthodox community now.
It's often something that's overlooked, these life cycle events that we go through in the Jewish community, and the impact that it has when the community is not present for them. So thank you for sharing that. So this next question is for the entire panel. The past few years have been a difficult time for LGBTQ plus people, and specifically for trans people. How has that affected you? And what are some concrete things we and our allies can do to make a difference? Start with.
And I think anytime I read about someone being murdered or someone taking their own life, it's internalized, like that pain is felt. I have actually started hanging out with friends more, to be honest with you, because I feel like it's important to have community. It's important to reach out, especially in Los Angeles. Los Angeles, I feel like, is such a difficult place. So I work in entertainment, and I think many times it's like, you work on set, you get really close to somebody, and then the project is done, and you never see them again. And it's such an isolating feeling. So that's been like a lot of my experience here, and I've started to actually just kind of see and recognize, hey, a lot of people are feeling that way, and started reaching out to people, like just hanging out and enjoying life more, because I feel like we can read about the traumas, but when we get to really celebrate just being alive, so I'm trying to really just, there are no kids in the room, I was gonna say, just trying to have more effing fun, enjoying life, because life is short, and it flies by. In terms of concrete actions, there's a great organization called Trans Can Work, and they provide like job training, assistance, and also training for people who are in positions to hire other people to understand the trans community better and to like make their workspaces safer for trans people and more inclusive. And I think if you're in a position to hire trans people, and actually probably first trans women of color, because I think they are the most vulnerable community within the trans community. So that's one thing that everybody else can do. Yeah.
I feel the same way. That's a very good point. A lot of people that I follow on social media and stuff, one of their biggest problems is paying the bills, getting jobs. Because a lot of times when you come out as trans or you work, HR might say it's just fine and everything's going to be good, but sometimes even if the company accepts you, your coworkers do not, and so you're immediately ousted, or you just find it too difficult to work there and you have to leave. So I think that's probably the most important thing, I feel like, is making sure that trans people have jobs, because we're all qualified to do something. Some of us see pretty good stuff too.
The first thing I was going to say, honestly, was hire trans people. But before you hire trans people, make sure that you have created an environment where trans people can thrive, and not one where you're just checking a box of a diversity hire, and bringing trans people into an environment, a company, a situation where they're really set up to fail. And how you can do that is like be a cis ally at work. And if you think you work in a space, first of all, if you think you work at a place and you say there's no trans people who work here, like you don't know that. Trans people look like all kinds of things. Trans people could be in the closet and just not feel safe enough to come out in the workplace. So, you know, be a cis ally at work by asking who would feel comfortable here, who is this an inclusive environment to, really like breaking down the word inclusive. And like there's an amazing book that I love called A Quick and Easy Guide to They Them Pronouns, and it is a comic book about how to use they them pronouns and about how not to gender people right when you see them. And yeah, there's just educate yourself and make sure, is there a bathroom that is, that is for all people as opposed to a men's bathroom or a women's bathroom? Like, those are some easy steps.
Everything that they've just said is integral to just my everyday life. My company is very, very new. I started my company on September 11th. I didn't realize what day that was until somebody reminded me of it a week or so later. But I work for a company that should have been, or is supposed to be, supposed to be progressive in regard to the LGBT community. And in many ways it is. But in the workplace, there's moments when it is and there are moments when it isn't. But I think that for me, I have a particular personality that kind of gravitates or draws people toward me. And it's basically because I have absolutely no problem living in my own reality and living in my own truth. That has never been a problem for me. I have several rules that I live by, and I always suggest that people who are homophobic live by those rules as well, because it'll make you a safer person. Basically, I'm bold enough to break the rules and strong enough to make my own every day, and that's how I live my life. For those people that don't live in this society or don't live in a particular reality and understand that we've been here since the beginning of time, I suggest that they watch their tone, keep their distance, and keep their hands to themselves. It's as simple as that with me. And I always maintain that the people in my immediate circle, the people who I encounter every day, are, for lack of better phraseology, under my personal protection. This is my community. I protect this community. I am perfectly willing at any moment in time to speak that truth or sacrifice myself for the protection of my community. That's the bottom line. When it comes to employment, everyone on this panel is absolutely right. The transgender community, particularly the African American trans community, the trans community of color, has a major problem with employment. But it's not just employment, it's housing as well. Because there are moments in time when people move into housing in their birth identity, and then they transition while they're in that housing, and the property owners or the managers come up with some reason or another to evict them from that property. Those things need to stop. But when it comes down to stuff like that, when it comes down to employment, when it comes down to housing, I am a proponent of proving our own worth. By that I mean that we should really stop teaching our friends and our family members and our associates how to get educated to get a good job to retire with. We should be teaching them how to get educated to get a good job that leads into ownership of themselves and their rights and their names and their worlds and their lives. When it comes down to housing, we have all this housing sitting around here that's just sitting derelict because the people who own those properties are waiting for larger corporations to come in and offer them some money so that they can gentrify that neighborhood, which isn't always bad, but sometimes it is, right? But they can turn those properties into incredibly expensive housing for people that can afford that housing. It's ridiculous that you have to pay $3,000 for rent in a neighborhood that a year ago you probably would pay 15 cents just to stand on the corner. It's ridiculous that we have to do that. Within that, I am a proponent of finding funding that will allow us to purchase those properties and turn those properties into safe housing for the trans community. And in some cases, turn those properties into properties that will allow us to take trans women off the street and bring them into an environment that will allow us to give them training and things, to create a business that monetizes itself so they have work experience so they can go out in the world, to teach them policy and to teach them how this world works from a political standpoint so that they can go out and fight those things. And I encourage our allies to link with us, have a conversation with us. Like you said, we we're not scary people. We can be, right? By and large, we're not scary people, right? But we are sticks. You know, so when people walk up on me, I'm really, really funny about how I deal with you because I don't know if you want to talk to me about, you know, what my world is like or if you want to try to cause me harm, you know. But have a conversation with me. I'm easy to talk to. I might not look like that sometimes, but I'm easy to talk to. Have a conversation with us. My GoFundMe says advocacy in action. My allies should be allies in action, which means that you cannot pay me lip service today, and then when I call you for services or for help tomorrow, oh, I'm busy, I can't do it. Maybe you should talk to so-and-so. I'm not really conducive to that. I mean, I'm about action, and my allies should be about action as well. Now, even if they can't be on the front lines with me, I'm cool with that, I understand that. Give me a call, let me know where you can support me, that's action. And when I call on you, that's action, because when you call on me, I show up. You know, I show up every day. And I expect my allies to do the same. That's very important to me as an African-American trans woman in the society that we live in. Hell, it was less than a year ago when they were trying to write transgender people out of the entire lexicon in this country. So we are at a point in this country right now where we have to be allies to each other. It's incumbent upon us to be strong in our defense of who we are, in our worlds, in our reality, and in our truth. And if you can't do that, right, don't pay it lip service. Just don't say anything. Move in a different direction. But for those of us who are here, these are the things that we need. We need housing, we need employment, and we need people who can say that to the people who listen and to decide. We need to be in the rooms with the people that make decisions that govern our lives every day, that don't give us an opportunity to have input into that. We need to be in those rooms. So if you can help us with that, man, we're definitely conducive to that because these are the things that we truly need. So, thank you.
Thank you.
So on a community level, when somebody comes out as trans, they tend to lose a lot of their community. So one of the things that
up, please? Well, move the microphones.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you.
Thank you.
So when somebody transitions, they tend to lose a lot of community. So the community they had tends to shrink. At least that's happened for me and for a bunch of other people. And one of the best things that I found helpful for me were people that weren't necessarily close to me at all, or people that I'd just seen reach out to me, text me, stop me in the supermarket, say, hi, how are you? Can we be friends? I want to offer you to come to lunch. I want to go to coffee with you. And help expand their community so that they end up having more people to rely on and more people that feel that they are accepted for who they are.
Thank you.
We don't need it.
In 10 years?
10 years.
In 10 years, I see the first transgender presidential candidate. I see more of us sitting on city councils across the board, all the way up to, you know, the highest offices in the state. I see more of us in police departments, you know, in a stronger voice in the communities, and more ownership in the world that we live in.
Yeah.
I see a lot of our youth identifying as non-binary in some way. It's already becoming a larger percentage of the teenagers nowadays identify as, I am not part of your boxes. Whatever that is, they are rejecting it. So it's going to increase quite a bit.
I see more representation in media. I mean, I see casting being a lot more inclusive and open and agreed. And I think we continue to move in a positive and forward direction. I'm excited for that.
I hate that shit up for me, so I know what it's really about.
Well, I live in Long Beach. I'm moving there soon.
Moving there.
And everybody in Long Beach is very, very open and very accepting. I mean, I rarely have any problems in Long Beach, or West Hollywood for that matter. West Hollywood's fantastic. But there's some small, you know, cities here and there where there are still problems. But I think in this area here, in 10 years, it'll be a non-issue. I really do.
So I'm gonna put my last 2 cents in because I've got about 60 seconds. And you know, it's interesting that we talk what the trans community or what the trans world will look like 10 years from now. I was in Kansas City last week speaking to a group of undergraduate agricultural students. And I, in my presentation was, using the word cisgender. And at the end, during the Q&A, one of the students raised their hands and said, can you explain to me what cis means? And after I explained it, came down off the stage, there was somebody that came up from another table and said, no one at my table knew what the word cisgender meant until you said it. And so that just really speaks to, the education that's happening now that hasn't happened in the past. And definitely hopeful for what the next 10 years brings for all of us, community and allies. And so with that, I want to thank our panel for being so